Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to our session, despite the cold and rainy weather, and also the competition that we have. We really appreciate that, and I'm very happy that we can have this session in this sort of beautiful room. When I was here yesterday, I thought that our federal president inaugurates ministers here, but I think it's another room actually. In this building, but I don't know, maybe somebody else knows it better. This session would discuss the Global Gateway. It's about green financing, and in general we try to understand to what extent also Global Gateway, the EU's flagship program, can contribute to green financing on the one hand, on the other hand also to development. I don't know who knows about the Global Gateway. It has been announced in 2021, so 2 years ago. It's about 300 billion euros strong. It consists of a mix of different sort of money types or types of investments, and almost like 250 billion of those 300 billion are actually leveraged investments from the private sector, which are already dedicated. So a lot of the money that's announced by the Global Gateway is actually not fresh money. But what we try to understand in this panel is actually to what extent the Global Gateway can support development finance and how we can maybe do also better. I'm joined by 3 distinguished panelists, and I think I would just introduce them one after the other first, and just a short introduction, and then start right into it. On the left of mine, it's Ahmed Akhrari. You are leading the hydrogen work at Verbund, and I think it's also a quite new department, if I'm not mistaken. So you have a lot of experience there, and I think hydrogen is also a very important topic when it comes to development finance. Then next to you is Sabine Gaber. You are CEO of the Austrian Development Bank, and if you talk about green finance, if you talk about development financing, I think you're the perfect person to talk to. And then on my very left is Michael Kainz. You are generally also heading at the Federal Foreign Ministry. You're heading the Department for Connectivity and Innovation. And I think also this sort of foreign ministry perspective is very important for this panel. And I would love to start discussion to just ask you, Sabine. The Global Gateway program is the EU's new program, to some extent, to channel development finance into sustainable infrastructure in, for example, energy, health, education, but also other areas. Coming from the Austrian Development Bank, what do you think are the implications of the Global Gateway program for the financing activities at the Development Bank of Austria?
Thank you for the invitation of being here today. The Development Bank of Austria is the official development bank, and our mandate is to support private sector investments and financing in developing countries in the Global South. And originally, the European Union has not considered in the very important way mutual beneficial partnerships, and European Union was criticized a lot from the Global South that they have not cared for local jobs, for local income, to create also green jobs in the Global South. And now the European Union has integrated in the Global Gateway project also the spirit of development finance, creation of impact, and the mutual beneficial partnership approach. This is very important when you go to countries in Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, Latin America, or the Caribbean, because when I meet our partners there, you need really to know how the regulatory framework is in place, how the market is working, who are the companies where you can go ahead in relation to corruption and the rule of law. And therefore, also the European Union has also invited us, we are 15 development finance institutions in Europe, to participate to the Global Gateway flagship project financing. Because on the one hand, you have from Europe, Team Europe, and Team Europe is European Investment Bank and EBRD. They are doing both sides, large tickets, public and private finance. But do remember, European Investment Bank in the past, it is a very young institution when it comes to project finance in developing countries in the private sector. And EBRD is more focused in the EU neighborhood region. That's the reason why OEB and other 15, so altogether we have 15 development finance institutions, are also part of financing these EU flagship projects. And together we have a consolidated portfolio of 50 billion. So we are really having a lot of experience in these areas. What are we doing? I'm also part of an observer of the Global Gateway Business Advisory Group, and we started now to advise the European Commission how to mobilize private investments, how to mobilize private monies, and how to structure projects in a way that they are sustainable in the long run. And we have already one pipeline in the optic fiber network place, and we have really realized that it is very important to bring in the private sector knowledge. Then when it comes to risk, it is very important that you attract private investors in these difficult countries, that you do a kind of leveraging by blending financing with grant monies from the European Union, with own technical assistance monies, but also with guarantees under EFSD+. And these guarantees are very important to de-risk underlying risks that private investors are in the position to invest. And currently we have really a massive infrastructure investment and financing gap there. And that's the reason, and this is our job, to attract investments and to come together and to fill the gap, not only on the public side, but also on the private side.
Thank you so much for your perspectives, and I think you've touched upon a lot of important points, and I think we'll discuss them later. More importantly, equal partnerships. That's one topic, and the other thing is, of course, also investment risk. And if we talk about investment risks, it's of course important to have a private sector perspective. Hamiat, like Verbund is, as I've mentioned at the beginning, is you're currently developing your hydrogen portfolio, which also includes transport and production. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is a part of the portfolio. And what we see when you look at a lot of papers, reports, and so on, a lot of feasible hydrogen production sites are actually not in the EU. You see countries such as Chile, which I mentioned, the MENA region in general, also African countries. So, which would be, of course, then outside of the EU, and then you could think about whether private sector could invest in those countries, which are often also developing countries. So my question to you would be, to what extent is Verbund interested in developing hydrogen projects in those areas? That's one thing. And the other thing is, of course, to what extent do you think could a program such as the Global Gateway help de-risk investments in these areas?
Thanks for the invitation. Beautiful place here. I've been in many similar places, but this is one of the top three, I would say. So when it comes to your question, as you rightly said, so what we are currently doing is developing the hydrogen business. So it means actually the larger scale of the hydrogen business. And probably I go one or two steps back just to get us all on the same page, because you could also say, okay, why don't we produce all the hydrogen here in Austria and then consume it and that's it? There are a couple of reasons for that, for why we need to import. One reason is we will have a very steep increase of the demand. So just to give you a very short glimpse, currently we have a demand of around 160,000 tons, just to have a figure, of gray hydrogen. And in 2030, it will be the same amount of green hydrogen. So this actually needs to be somehow replaced. A lot will happen via local production, but not all will be covered by local production, by far not. And then in 2035, we will have a demand of 600,000 tons. So, and this is where it becomes tricky, or starts to become tricky. And at the same time, we have a limited availability of green electricity here in Austria. So this is, let's say, that's two major reasons why we actually need to import. So if you want to import, and this is what we have analyzed, we were actually looking at a couple of routes, so 3 handsful, 15, 16 routes, and also production areas worldwide. And we boiled it down to 3 and 4 along a certain set of criteria. And one criterion is proximity, of course, and connectivity. Proximity speaks for itself. Connectivity means, is there any kind of, let's say, infrastructure connection already existing that I could make use of, or can I reuse infrastructure? Because we are the strong opinion that for our part of Europe, it is going to be the best option to import hydrogen via pipelines. So if you have connecting lines already to different neighboring regions, that's a plus. Another point would be, do I have the possibility to produce hydrogen at low costs? Hydrogen and green electricity at low costs. That's the case, for example, in Norway. That's the case in the North Sea, in the Baltic Sea, even up to Finland. That's also the case in North Africa, like in Tunisia, like in Morocco, like in Algeria, Egypt, but also in the Middle East, for example, Saudi Arabia. Then the third criterion is what is it that you find as an environment? So do you have a serious environment? Is the route feasible? Are there enough players? Is the government willing to act as an exporter for green hydrogen? So, and if you put all these criteria together, you get to the selection of certain routes, and this is the reason why we came up to actually three routes: the northern route, the eastern route, which is currently on hold because of the war, Ukraine, and the southern route, which is then entailing all the areas like Middle East and North Africa. And here, you can imagine then that here financing is starting to play a big role. I mean, you have to finance everywhere. When talking upstream hydrogen investments, so we are the opinion that if we want to supply hydrogen on a long-term basis to our clients, we need to go upstream. We need to have our own produced volumes. So that means that we have to heavily invest into upstream facilities. And here we are talking about multi-billion investments. Just to give you an example, 200,000 tons in Saudi Arabia currently cost $8 to $9 billion. And that's just the production of green electricity, green hydrogen, no pipeline, nothing else. So we are talking about large investments, and these investments need to be de-risked to a certain extent. And I put the emphasis on certain extent because there is always a certain kind of business risk that we as a company have, and we cannot say that we don't want to have any entrepreneurial or business risk, but we are acting in areas that come with a different kind of risk profile than we are used to. So, for example, Tunisia has a different kind of risk profile than Norway or Germany. So, and this is something that actually needs to be taken care of. And we have different instruments that you can take, and Global Gateway could be one of these instruments or one, let's say, platform. We just need to, and to come to your question, is that something that could be of use for us? We just need to better understand, and this is talking from the producer's point of view, better understand where are the benefits of Global Gateway. So who is benefiting? Is it the exporter, the exporting country, or is it just the country that you produce, so no export will be benefiting from that, or is it going to be both? In our view, the best would be if both parties can benefit from such a program like Global Gateway. This is one thing. And there we have found contradictory information. So for us, it still appears ambiguous, so probably we have to learn more about that program. And the other item is that it's always a question of what amount of money are we talking about. So when I'm talking about 8 or 9 billions of investment, you can imagine that 10 million or 20 million of support is something, but it's not playing a big role, and that's what matters.
Thank you so much for the perspectives and also giving the overview of the situation. I believe just having sort of business view is really crucial, and you've also touched upon an important crucial role in terms of partnerships, also sharing the profit in a way. That's one part. And the other aspect, which I found also very important, is in terms of politics or geopolitics, to try to understand what the landscape is. Are these countries which you want to work with, are they feasible partners? Are they the wrong partners, the right partners? What is the reality, let's say, on the ground? And in that sense, I actually would like to go to Michael Kainz. You're just heading the department for sustainability, connectivity, and innovation. And if you look at the communiqué of the Global Gateway that the European Commission put out, the communication document clearly states multiple times that the Global Gateway program is also something that's linked to geopolitics, to just have a stance, to just strengthen the EU's geopolitical role globally. And my question to you would be, if you, in the light of, on the one hand, the financing need, on the other hand, this sort of this geopolitical aspect, to what extent do you believe can development finance or should development finance be used as a geopolitical tool?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. I think Global Gateway should be seen in a wider context. Basically, it is based on a pledge by G7 countries to improve infrastructure in a wider sense in the global south. And the Global Gateway is just the EU's contribution to this wider effort. From an internal point of view, it is part of the external action of the European Union, and the European Union's external action has been and is always based on values and standards. That's very important. And we should not forget that our values and our standards globally are under pressure. And in that sense, the geopolitical position of the European Union has to be strengthened. Our standards, our values, our policies mean human rights, social standards, gender equality, rule of law, good governance, partnership with recipient countries, and so on and so forth. And our Global Gateway projects are, contrary to others, from other donors, they are fully in line with the SDGs. They are fully in line with the Paris Agreement. So the basic idea is to export or to support the European way of doing business, the European way of govern, the European way to treat people, and to uphold human rights, social and ecological standards. And by that, our aid is, it has often already been underlined, it is fit for the 21st century. We do not just invest to get out something. We invest in order to have partners. We are interested in a long-term relation, and we are interested in a future-proof relation, which means human rights, values, standards, SDGs, and so on and so forth. And in that sense, this Global Gateway serves also, if you may say so, the export of values and standards, but for the common good, and that's a big difference to other programs.
Thank you so much. I would also like to challenge your thoughts, but before I would say that, maybe you can already think about some question you want to ask, because I would now just try to have this different question, but afterwards I would just open the Q&A, and I would like to challenge your thought, because there's also been a lot of criticism for the Global Gateway from different players, stakeholders, scolders, that essentially that the Global Gateway program would actually reinforce some sort of almost colonial structures that have already existed before, and basically also create some sort of dependency of donor countries that are receiving end of the funding from the EU. This is a criticism that has been ongoing, and that links back to partnerships, because we've talked about partnerships multiple times. Under the light of this criticism, how do you believe can we facilitate equal partnerships between, let's say, developing countries and the EU as a whole? How can this be done? Because personally, what I see is that too often it has fallen short.
Yeah, of that the word neo-colonialism is of course not appropriate in this context. But if you look at the project, at the lists of projects, very often these projects, they are initiated by recipient countries. So they say, we need something, we want something. And the European Union answers by saying, okay, let's sit together, let's have a look. And then a project is developed. And the project's goal is to be of mutual benefit. That's the ideal solution. And I think this partnership approach is really something which is different to other donors, whatever. This is really central. I said already, the European Union's approach is always based, the whole external action of the European Union, it's not only Global Gateway, but also humanitarian aid, is always based and driven by values and standards. So we ask for example, good governance. We ask for the respect of the rule of law. We see to it that corruption is eliminated to the extent possible. Other donors, if I may say so, they do not care about this. And this approach is really a unique feature of the EU's external action. And this is clearly something which I would definitely call partnership. We want to help and not to profit. If both sides profit, fine, but the primary objective is not to profit ourselves. It's a win-win approach.
I think, so I can completely confirm that, or coming from a different kind of perspective, what you are saying is that you are actually, from my point of view, creating a healthy environment for us also. If we go somewhere and start to invest, so where do you invest? You start to invest in investment-friendly environments. And if you have the impression that none of these basics is given there, then of course you start to think about these investments twice. And that's what I think where you are hitting a very good point, that such programs of course can help us to find the right environment. And to come to your remark a couple of minutes ago, our experience is when we talk to potential or to the representatives of potential production countries, this matter is, let's say, the on top of the agenda. So the first question is, if it doesn't come from them, it comes from us. So what is it that you leave here, apart from royalties? Royalties, also Shell in Nigeria leaves royalties, but I think that's something that needs to be discussed from the very beginning.
But when it comes to the technical or financial side, it's quite clear that you really create long-lasting impact, because as development banks, you have the duty to measure your results. For example, OEB, we are using the development effectiveness rating tool, and there we have really the approach that we have to measure all also created decent jobs, direct jobs, indirect jobs, local income, tax income, everything. And then you can always say this is too complicated, but by the end you have the proven evidence that you create impact in the partner country in the global south. This is the one message. The second message, we have a strategy from the Ministry of Finance where we have clear KPIs and indicators how much volume we have to finance in the global south, in sub-Saharan Africa, in least developed countries. And this is what, when it comes to the private sector financing, very concretely. On the other hand, you have on the public side, when you go in a country in Africa, you need to have multilateral development banks with local offices there. They're really taking the local government on the hand. and they have to accompany and they have to support the local government in implementing our standards, not only the rule of law, not only gender, not only democratic values, but also when it comes to very concrete how you can really offtake energy on the basis of which kind of contracts, how do you consider inflation, how do you consider technically things that private investors are ready to go there. Currently, we see that they are fleeing from developing countries due to the very complex situation and to the geopolitical fragmentation. And yes, and we need millions, billions of dollars. And we have also FX risks, depreciation risk, and everything is now in place. Therefore, I fully agree that it is not only a European partnership. Global Gateway is connected to G7. With G7, we have on board also US TFC, we have on board FinDev Canada, we have on board GBIC, we have on board all the democratic other institutions of G7, and they have huge monies in their pockets, and we have to align, not only to join forces, to join values, but also to join monies. And we need not only to have the development institutions in place and the multilateral development banks and the export credit agency, we need to attract huge monies from the private sector, from private insurance companies, from private huge whatever. And in this case, it is very important to have de-risking instruments in place and to create also, for example, we are now in touch with DCX to decrease the FX risk in Africa, because currently the hedging costs are too high, they are too expensive. And that's the reason that the development banks are also in the advisory group, because it's very important to create structures where all this political thinking can be done, and and where the projects can be realized in a way that we can go ahead and that we can attract huge monies, billions. And one slogan of the Touch Development Bank is from millions to billions to trillions, and I think this is really the way what we should have in mind. It's very costly and we need huge monies. Yeah.
Thank you so much for these different perspectives, very valuable, at least for me. Do we have any questions in the audience? I think I see a hand here. No, I give you the hand first because he was first in the previous panel.
Yes, good morning. My name is Elizabeth. I work for the United Nations Environment Program, and I worked before in multilateral development banks, so the discussion is really interesting to me. I'm going to be so greedy as to ask 2 questions, but if that's all right, then you don't have to answer them. My first question is to Ms. Gaber. I was wondering, you spoke about partnerships and how you are one of 15 institutions who are led into the resources of the Global Gateway. And you spoke about, partnerships that should also work for developing countries in the Global South. Are any of these 15 countries, do they have access, among those 15 entities, are any of those like the African Development Bank, or are they national development banks, and do they have, for instance, access to that funding? Because I think that might be something that they would, want to advocate for, right, in the spirit of partnerships. And my second question is to everyone, but perhaps you have a particular perspective on this. When you reflected on the volumes here, and when you asked the bold question to what extent development finance is a geopolitical tool, it occurred to me that whenever you read about these narratives, the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative or the US responses to that, it's always about those 2 players, and the volumes of the EU funding seem quite sizable. So I wonder, is this because they're not as sizable as I think they are? Is it because they're split between EU monies and the rest of the country's monies, or is it because just in media terms it doesn't fit this narrative? That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
With regards to the first question, yes, we have access to the monies. We have just approached for EFSD Plus guarantee. We have received the guarantee, and we are now financing the underlying project in Sub-Saharan Africa. And we have also 50 billion in place for the 15 development banks to mobilize more EFSD Plus guarantees, and we have access. That's the first thing. From the grant money side, the European Union will come back next year with huge monies also to have first loss tranches to bring in and to attract attractors and to leverage financing. And limited pockets on the European Union side, you are completely right. Currently, the European Union is really focusing on certain digital and transport corridor projects. It is mutually beneficial, but we are here really under pressure due to the war with the Ukraine. So we need to have priorities and to set priorities. But in my opinion, in the medium and long run, G7 must really join forces. Otherwise, we cannot keep and hold our democratic values. We cannot manage the green transition at all. And we need, for example, what is our position with regards to US and to the others? I think we have a very good player when it comes to innovation and technology. We have many hidden champions here. And when I follow all the projects in the pipeline, Europe has a lot to give, and I think this could be a good alignment of interests to keep the rule of law. And in short term, it's more focused on priority projects of the European Union, connecting Greece with Egypt, and so on. But in the medium and long run, all the democratic institutions come hugely under pressure, and they will then join forces, for sure.
Does somebody else want to respond to that question, or shaking heads? Cyril.
Thank you for the really interesting panel, and also thank you for the great question. It goes in the same direction. My name is Cyril, and I'm joining the World Bank actually very soon, and that's why this development bank conversation is very interesting to me. We hear about the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the African Development Bank, and then the European Investment Bank. Now we hear about the Global Gateway Program with the national development banks. There is competition. There's competition to finance different projects. There's competition to choose the partners. And my question, specifically from an Austrian perspective, Austria funds the Austrian Development Bank. It funds the World Bank. Is there a conflict of interest? Is there a conflict of interest between the World Bank, which is largely led by US interests, and is there a conflict of interest with the Global Gateway Program?
First of all, this is a misunderstanding. We are funding ourselves on the capital market, so we are not. We don't get monies from the taxpayers. We go to the capital market, refinance ourselves, and on-lend the monies. But we receive a guarantee from the Ministry of Finance, and we have to pay for the guarantee quite a high premium, to be honest. And so we are on the safe side when it comes to defaults, that we have really a self-surviving circle project flow, money flow. And when it comes to the international financial institutions, there we pay a lot of money to all these different IFIs for larger projects, for politically projects, because there are so many different nations are in the back as stakeholders. And there it comes more politically, because in some of these IFIs, not only European or Western nations are stakeholders, but also China or others. Therefore, you can't go not like under the Global Gateway. It's a pure European interest, a pure European strategy. When it comes to IFIs like World Bank and the private sector arm, IFC, Asian Development Bank or Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, this is quite more politically, because then the stakeholders say, what is the strategy? How much volume must flow in this and this region? And when it comes to the World Bank, there has been a huge criticism, because where is the net zero transition pathway there? What is their green agenda? How do they support green transmission, and what kind of technology is in place, and what happens if the technology is developed and after 3-4 decades it is driving against the wall again. So this is highly political, and we are not in competition, because unfortunately we don't get such huge monies in the pockets. I really would promote the Development Bank of Austria and support more in the direction of Austrian and European interests, but it is like it is, and in Austria you have more a focus on the huge IFIs, World Bank and so on, because by the end they join forces, they join monies, and they can really create an impact from millions, billions to trillions. That's the reason that we have a focused strategy and that we are supporting also projects in the interest of Europe and Austria.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Michael.
Competition.
Maybe use the mic.
You mentioned competition between the financial institutions. I mean, we are just 1 month ahead of COP28. We know already now that the negotiations there will be difficult and that money plays an essential role. The world is in a crisis. The needs are huge. So the more of these institutions we have, the better it is. And I think we need huge amounts of money, huge investments, and I fear this time we have to get it right. So here comes again Global Gateway into play, because we have only one chance. We must get it right this time, and we will only get it right if we invest based on standards and values. If we see to it that this is well done, and without rule of law, SDGs, Paris Agreement, and so on and so forth, we will not get it right. We will not make investments which are future-proof, fit for the 21st century. That's the point. And here I think Global Gateway has an important role to play.
Thank you very much. There was a question here.
Thank you for the panel. My name is Bou Gerard. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Ebreeze. It's a private company based in Senegal, working on solar irrigation for smallholder farmers. And my question is, what's the place of private companies in the recipient countries in the Global Gateway? Because at the end, those are the companies that are creating jobs for the long term and creating high impact for those populations. So what's the place for those companies in the Global Gateway? Because it's hard for them to access to finance most of the time, and that's the question I have for this.
In the Global Gateway Group, there are 60 CEOs of large institutions, but not only of large institutions. There are also CEOs of four CEOs of institutions who are representing small and medium-sized companies and microfinance institutions or micro institutions. And they have especially the task to bring in financing solutions that also smaller and medium-sized companies in the global south, that they have access to monies, because this is very important that they come back to the entrepreneurship after all these crises, due to the fact that the small and medium-sized sector and companies, they care for 80 up to 90% of local jobs. And therefore it is very important that they get access to formal monies and to formal services, banking services, not only financing, also saving, insurance. And from OEB side, this is our core mandate. And how is our approach? We can't finance directly each and every little company. We go via funds or local financial intermediaries and support all the local institutions that they can on-lend also different kinds of financing products to smaller institutions and to medium-sized and micro companies. That's our approach. And this we have done quite successfully also in the range of the 15 development institutions in Europe. I think most of the business is done there from us.
Hello. Thank you for the panel as well. My question is aimed towards education and training of the workforce that will be necessary to build all this infrastructure. You mentioned 8 billion going into a 200,000 ton hydrogen production plant. So we need way more than that. So there will be a lot of money flowing into infrastructure, but someone has to build it. Currently, we are working in the World Energy Council YEP program on an energy education project, where we are aiming towards Austrian youth to understand the crucial, how crucial the energy transition is in terms of climate change, and why it's better to search for a job there than glue yourself to the street somewhere. So that's small. And the question is now, how would you aim a training program or a education program towards people in the global south? Because you have to have probably different approaches there, and most of the infrastructure, or like a big part of the infrastructure, will be built there. So how would we have to shape the education program to address those like other audiences?
So probably, if I may, so first of all, that's a very good idea to educate as many people, young people as possible, to go into hydrogen, because we are lacking people. So we means the hydrogen economy is lacking people, since it is a young industry and not like oil industry for decades existing. So this is one side. This is what is happening here, and when we are talking to the as I say, representatives of the countries then in where we want to produce, we realize there are a lot of very highly qualified people who are looking for opportunities. That's one of the major headaches that are existing there, the way we see it, because what is very often happening is that the highly qualified people just go somewhere. They go to Europe, they go to the US, they just go somewhere where they get good money for their qualification, because there is no proper profile in terms of jobs for them existing. And from my point of view, what we all are talking about, what we can do is really to provide them with a possibility, with the grounds to stay there, but also to pay into the overall build up of a hydrogen economy, which also happens there. When we build up the hydrogen economy there, it does not mean that everything goes into Europe. A lot has to remain there, and inter alia, it would also be education and also, let's say, training people to make sure that the business is running.
Somebody else?
Yes, when it comes to OEB, we provide technical assistance monies for project accompanying training measurements, and it depends clearly on each and every project what kind of knowledge is needed. And it depends on the technology, and it depends what is the need of a local company. And what we are doing is we are paying then the concrete consultant for the job of doing the training measurement locally, because you need to speak the language. You need to know what is the exact level of education, how developed is the company where you are providing financing, and it's very different. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, there is the Global Gateway project with the 300 billion, and there next year also huge technical assistance. Money will come up also for training measurements and for research, for education and for health. And here, I think it's a little bit too early because there formed 5 project groups. I'm in the energy and climate group with regards to the business advisory group for the European Commission. But hopefully next year I know a little bit more about how you or other companies can approach as well such programs of the European Union, or if it is only linked to financing for EBRD, DFIs and so on. But keep in touch.
Thank you. Is there any other question from the audience? Otherwise, I can ask an audience question because I'm suddenly in the audience. One thing that you mentioned multiple times is also the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. And I think we've seen the news reports a few weeks back that they have also credit issues, or some countries are now in debt and so on. They also have issues. And my question to you would be, what do you think is the Global Gateway doing better than the Belt and Road Initiative? And are there any things that the EU in general or the Global Gateway could actually learn from the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative?
The answer at the Global Gateway Forum was we have to be stronger in the way how we come back to the markets, and we can't come not only with finance and development. We have really to integrate a lot of technology and digitalization and know-how. This is something what we can offer there. And what we can also do is that we can show from the past that the projects what we create there, they are sustainable in terms of impact, law of rule, and also human rights. Yeah, because we have met from the 15 DFIs, the High Commissioner on Human Rights in Geneva on Monday, and there is a huge need to keep our democratic values and to care for human rights. And this is something what the people in the medium and long run more and more understand when they cooperate with the Chinese. They often come in the country, they build up things, and then they leave. Many of them stay there. But in terms of quality, they often come back to Europe or US or other advanced economies when the project is failing. And this is always the case, not only values, but also technology, and to keep the project running. And now, on top, sustainable, green and just transition is very important for developing countries.
But personally, this also links back to some also institutions, local institutions in some of these sort of countries which are on the receiving end. And Hamid, you also talked about this, also about this political landscape, which is really crucial when you also would like to invest in certain countries. But from a private sector point of view, what can you do about these things, about these issues? Can you somehow help alleviate these issues, or is it just somehow when you see a country is not feasible, there's basically nothing you can do? Are there any things you can do as a private sector representative to support the development of institutions, maybe even, or to sort of navigate through these challenges?
Yes, but it takes a while. I mean, the nature of our business, this is rather something that takes a lot of time, and also you actually cannot do it alone. So when you talk private sector, I find it very difficult that a company or a group of companies goes somewhere and tries to make sure that all the basis is there, that they can accommodate into that. I think that's difficult, and for that reason, from our point of view, and the way we have to build up our business, it is very crucial that we have the public sector at our side, and that means really from the early beginning until we launch the boat, so to say. That means that in fact, choosing regions is one thing, but also making sure that to speak to the right people and also speak to the right institutions, have the right set of rules, and money comes later. And that you have the common understanding about what you are wanting to do, because what you are building up or wanting to build up is a long-term business. And long-term means you have to build up trust. And for that, you need the public sector. Means it takes a while, and you cannot do it alone. And the public sector there is highly important. And this is what we realize wherever we go. You will never find a company alone talking to a government or to an association or to stakeholders in a country. It's always a company backed by a government.
Thank you. Any other perspectives on that?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I run the risk to repeat myself.
Yeah.
But, as I said, what is the special feature of the G7 as a whole, but also a special feature of Global Gateway is the clear idea we want to be future-proof, fit for the future. And for this, in order to avoid problems, which you have just mentioned, we are basing our actions and our programs on values and standards. That's very important, because these values and standards give us the guarantee that projects are viable. And from the beginning on, we look into the economic viability of a project. Others don't. So that's a special feature of Global Gateway, and that makes it so important.
Thank you so much. Is there any other audience question? Just raise your hand. But if not, there's another audience question from my side. Generally speaking, linking back also to the basic structure of the Global Gateway, which we touched upon at the very beginning. At the end of the day, it's very much also about development finance, which is quite evident. If we just focus now, of course, on the development finance, and you've mentioned it multiple times, of course, that the Global Gateway builds on values and so on. But previously, this was also communicated that development finance needs to be based on European values, and that's rightly so, and that's good. But what is then the difference that the global gateway will actually produce? Because we've seen it already previously, that development finance was, the goal was basically to also just get the values of the European Union to, let's say, partner countries, to establish this sort of norm system. This has been happening already. So what's the new thing about the global gateway? Is it just a marketing gag at the end of the day? Or what's the biggest structural change that global gateway can produce compared to what has already been done at this point until now?
I think it is the implementation of ESG high-level standards, because in the past we did a lot of sometimes greenwashing or sustainable washing, and now there are clear rules with the EU taxonomy, and it is really a rule of law now, the green transition. And when you compare us with US or the others, we are the most toughest front runners when it comes to regulation. This is sometimes for the private investors very ugly, difficult, expensive, but if you wish to see the positive things, we will be then the first on the planet who have all these rules in place to manage the green transition, by the way, and that there are not only words. So, for example, if you discuss with the others, they say, oh, Mrs. Gaber, we will have new technologies, we'll have all these, these things, what we are discussing, I think, over the past decades. But what the people do not understand is that the time is running, and in between we have to help ourselves with the technologies what we have already in the place, and within this framework we have to do our best to make the green transition until we have new technologies in place. And I think this is something where the European Union is really having the flagship, and when comparing with World Bank has a huge role when it comes to regulatory framework and when it comes to help the governments that the private sector and the development banks from Europe can come in. But in comparison, European Union to US institutions, development institutions, I think there's a lot of pressure from the European Union itself that European Investment Bank, EBRD, and all the European EDFIs must be very tough and must really go ahead with the EU taxonomy and all the rules. And sometimes we also see that low and middle income countries and least developed countries, they need to have more time that they can transform. And even myself, I often discuss with the European Commission, we need to have a little bit more time for them. We need to have also time for very difficult industries because otherwise we cannot be fit for the future. And it must be a combination of social, ecological and economical things that we have a new ecosystem. And I think the new ecosystem is the way in the future how Europe can really be successful.
Thank you.
Maybe a remark, an overall or general remark. I mean, from a hydrogen perspective, looking at what is currently available in Europe, Global Gateway is one of many programs, and I'm really happy about Global Gateway that it exists. However, or at the same time, it's one of many programs, and in fact, it's good news because for us, we realize that now it's starting to emerge. The rules are starting to emerge. To some extent, EU tends to over-regulate, from my point of view. So I have nothing against regulation, as long as regulation is simple. And that's the reason why I said Global Gateway, to us, appears sometimes ambiguous. And it's not some secondary literature that we are looking at or Googling it. So we are in concrete talks to people that sometimes give us different questions on the same, different answers on the same question. This is something that still requires some polishing or fine-tuning from my point of view. The good news is there are also other programs existing, and from our point of view, one of the major instruments that will help us accomplish our targets are state guarantees. As I said, acting in areas where you have a higher risk profile or higher risks that requires state guarantees. cost no money. So from our point of view, support or let's say investment or funding support does not always necessarily have to cost a lot of money. It's just a question of which instrument do I choose.
Yes, and I think OEB has a good system because we are also bringing in the commercial sector when refinancing our business, and then on the top you have the guarantee of the Ministry of Finance, and this is a quite good system on the one hand. And secondly, I fully agree, when it comes to new regulations and new strategies, they must be balanced, because otherwise they fail, no? And I think it's the same with the regulation. Currently, simplification is really a need.
Thank you. I have a question here.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned earlier on the millions to billions and then trillions, and it's widely acknowledged that for the SDG agenda and the Paris Agreement that will be required, and that development finance institutions have a role. And you mentioned some tools like state guarantees already, how you bring private sector to the fore. But I have a feeling that we're not quite there yet, and I'm wondering whether there's anything that you wish were in place or that you would like announced at the COP or at another forum that would capacitate you more to bring the millions to billions at least. Thank you.
We all know that there is a huge financing gap, and if we bring together and join forces, it is still not enough. But we have to set priorities, and we need to invest huge monies in development and research, in technologies and innovation, digitalization, to create also more efficiency. And secondly, in local markets, we have also to build up local capital markets and local systems that they are not relying only on the advanced economies, because this brings the other risk of FX risk, yeah? And so you need also to build up local currencies that they can build up their own financing structure in the country. And this is something what is really a need.
Yes, you asked the question.
Can you use the mic, yeah.
Oh, sorry. You asked, why should it be different this time? The answer is very simple, because the times are different. We have actually a sense of crisis, of global crisis. This makes sure that we know that we have to get it right this time. That's the reason why the European Union has put in place a system of rules, standards, and controls. That's the first point. And the second point is, we have already talked about it, we are under pressure. There is competition. And this competition will make sure that this time we will act differently and better. That's my perspective.
Thank you so much also for coming back to the previous question, but it's very relevant what you've said. One thing, I've been told that we are, is it fine if I just ask another question? Okay, so there's another question here, maybe as a final question.
Yeah, thank you for this panel, very interesting. I'm the regional director from Andritz for Africa in the market management of hydropower. There are a lot of hydropower plants in development down in Africa, sub-Saharan region specifically. They are lacking financing. That is public-private projects, you name it, out in the amount of 20 big plants, which they do have a significant power output in the range of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 megawatt. So solar is fine, wind is fine. We need everything to really develop those countries. The global gateway concept. So talking about Africa, I'm down there as often I can. Are there significant plans from the European Union to really step into that and develop or is there a certain budget set aside taking the risk to develop hydropower in sub-Saharan regions? I do understand that by that, I would say we have to be a little bit careful to export our standards. I think that Africa or many countries, they have good work had been done. You just need to amplify it. there is a huge amount of significant knowledge in that field because they have already plants. Just remembering that we, in the 60s, 70s, Austria, we built the first huge power plants there in Africa. So we are refurbishing them, we are modernizing them, we go on with that. But we are lacking a little bit on the greenfield projects. We are lacking financing, so that would be your take on that.
Yeah, coming back to the pipeline, flagship pipeline 2023, I have seen more solar power plants in Africa combined with electrolyzers when it comes to Morocco and Namibia. And when it comes to the south, I have seen in least developed countries the rehabilitation of existing hydropower plants, but only little projects, to be honest. When it comes to larger projects, this is more in Latin America, where there are huge water resources, Georgia and so on. They are still very interested in hydropower. When it comes to the pipeline for 2024, I'm eager and I see what we can do and if we can finance there are more, but the thing is that the photovoltaic connection to this electrolyzation and to the green hydrogen now is more the topic within this program, I think. So, to be honest, this is, when I see the pipeline, it's more focused on solar power plants, yeah.
Does somebody else want to respond to that? Because otherwise, we are a little bit over time. Thank you so much for your patience. Also, thank you for the panel. Personally, I've learned a lot. You gave me a lot of insights, which I just previously didn't have. So thank you very much for joining us. Also for the audience, thank you very much for coming to this beautiful hall. I hope you can enjoy the rest of the event. And yeah, thank you very much, everybody. A big applause.